Welcome back to another video, guys. It's your boy Wraith Hoops, and today we've got a very interesting video topic for you guys. Now, obviously, we are at that point in the summer where the NBA offseason has gotten dry. At the beginning of it, the free agency period, there was over $1 billion spent on that first 24-hour period on players and their contracts. But now we're to the point where we're going to have to reflect on the past seasons, really just the past season more specifically, and some people are focusing on hot takes, which I might get around to, but right now I just wanted to focus on something that was very interesting to see play out last year and how it can play out going forward and the implications that it's going to have on the potential playoff picture and just the landscape of the NBA. And that topic has to do with the reflection of the trades that the Jazz made with Rudy Gobert and then with Donovan Mitchell. That trade for Rudy Gobert at the time was magnificent. The package that was provided by the Timberwolves was phenomenal, looking at it from a draft capital and the players that were offered. But a lot of times we look at trades at face value, and at the time it was a very big package, but that's what Utah was expecting for him because the gravity that Rudy Gobert has and the impact that he has specifically on the defensive side of the ball and protecting the rim. In the prime of his career, he's really blocking shots at roughly 7%. So in the advanced metrics category, the percentage of blocked shots is its own segment. And for him, at his peak, I believe it was 7.4% of shots were blocked by him when he was on the floor, which is phenomenal and obviously explains why he's always in the depoy conversation. Now, recently, I know during the 2020-2021 season, he did end up hitting 7%, but since then he's decreased, and even this past year with the Timberwolves, his first year, obviously, to give him some grace. But at the same time, he is one of the most bagless on the offensive side of the ball big men we've seen in league history. And the reason why he makes the money that he makes is because the ability that he has to alter shots at the rim and just change the entire, really bail out his teammates, even though he really doesn't have to do that as much with the Timberwolves as he did have to do with the Jazz players. But also just being able to make other offenses shoot more jumpers and be more reluctant to attack the basket. And obviously we know a layup goes in more often, or a dunk goes in more often than a three-pointer does, even though the percentages on three-point shooting have increased in recent NBA history. And with the Donovan Mitchell trade, it was more so finding a team that would provide them with the most assets. And in the beginning, a lot of people thought that he was going to end up going to the Knicks, but he didn't. They ended up dealing him to the Cavaliers for similar players and draft capital that Rudy Gobert got. So Danny Ainge, credit to him, made a phenomenal job with that front office to make the correct deals. And that front office did a phenomenal job putting together those packages and really finding the best trade partners that they could for those two. Now, a lot of people don't remember exactly what came of those packages, but I have a list right here that I'm going to go ahead and detail to you guys. Now, in this article, obviously by the Salt Lake Tribune, which is for Utah, it details, with no way to go up, it was time to start over. The Jazz traded Rudy Gobert and Mitchell for two different packages, in the end receiving Ochai, Malik Beasley, Leandro, Talen Horton-Tucker, Stanley Johnson, Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, Jared Vanderbilt, and Colin Sexton. Now, obviously, Jared Vanderbilt is with the Lakers and he's doing great things over there, but I wanted to focus more so alongside the Walker Kessler, Larry Markkanen, and Colin Sexton in this trade package. Along with, to not ignore, of course, 1 first-round pick in 2023, 2 in 2025, 2 in 2027, 2 in 2029, and rights to swap draft picks with the Cavaliers or Timberwolves in 26 and 28, which is a lot, to say the least. Now, Lauri Markkanen has really improved his offensive bag. Defensively, he's gotten a little bit better. But on the offensive side of the ball, he's really upped his percentages, particularly from a shooting standpoint, to the point where some people would say that he's shooting as though he thinks he's prime Dirk Nowitzki. And while that might, in theory, sound like it's a bit of hyperbole, it's really not, because he's been incredibly efficient from the field and he's upped all of his averages. Now, with Walker Kessler, I have a different video dedicated to him specifically because he essentially in this trade package became the replacement for Rudy Gobert. And really, it's easy to be tall, even though there's a small percentage of people that are tall and 7-footers in the league. But it's much more difficult to be 7 foot plus, have 7 foot plus wingspans, and then also get into position on defense to not commit a foul and force defenses to revolve around how you are playing on the defensive side of the ball when you're on the floor. And to his credit, Kessler, as a rookie, already does that at a phenomenal rate, altering over 8% of shots when he's on the floor. Now, admittedly, he only played 20 minutes, but he also averaged more blocks in that shorter amount of time than Rudy Gobert did in 32 plus minutes on a nightly basis. Now, he also played 70 games. I believe Rudy Gobert also played 70, but Walker Kessler started in 70 and then played another 4 where he came off the bench. With that being said, we've discussed Lauri Markkanen and we talked a little bit about Walker Kessler. And then Collin Sexton, even though he didn't really get to play much last season, I expect him to be a big contributor for them going forward, more so because he just has the air of being a dog. And on a lot of teams, you really need that extra oomph, that extra push behind your main guys, especially when you have a much younger roster. And a lot of people say they have a great young core that's on par roughly with the OKC Thunder, which is comparable, I would say. Lauri Markkanen doesn't necessarily fit the young role that they're putting on everybody, but he's also not necessarily old. So he's in that nice medium sweet spot to where he's got a couple more years where he can still work on his game. He can still get better offensively and defensively. And if he continues on the path that he's on right now, he's going to be a very well-respected player in the league. And honestly, while I wouldn't argue he's top 10, he's definitely, in my eyes at the very least, a top 25, fringe top 20 player in the league. Now, obviously, he plays in Utah, so a lot of people didn't catch a lot of those games or even really pay him much mind. But he was effective in the minutes that he played, and he also upped his averages and made a much-needed improvement to his game when many people thought that he was an afterthought to a certain extent. As far as Collin Sexton is concerned, obviously he's rather undersized in today's league when you think of the future of the NBA's point guards, when you have the LaMelo Balls, and if you want to count Ben Simmons in that conversation, when he's not afraid to play and he feels comfortable and within his own means, him as well. But with that being said, Collin Sexton makes up for it in tenacity and just the desire to not be outdone. And there's something to say about that because Russell Westbrook also has a similar demeanor about himself. Now, Collin Sexton is fast. He's also pretty athletic, not as athletic as obviously prime Russell Westbrook was, but he always makes the most of what he has and the tools that he has, which allows him to get out and running. It allows him to compete on the glass for the smaller guard that he is, and he's also always putting his hands in the passing lanes, and he's not backing down from a challenge. And if you're a young team, you need that type of energy, and it's very contagious when somebody's playing on the floor with you and they're holding that as their bar, because you want to, at the very least, be close to there, which already ups the floor for that team. I believe they have the capability to become a playoff team. Now, how high in the seeding do I expect? Not tremendously high. Obviously, they're a very young team. They do have Jordan Clarkson and a couple other pieces, but I feel as though they're going to have to take a lot of strides in the right direction before we can just outwardly say they're a contending team, because they're not a contending team. Now, obviously, they did trade away Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. One of the more interesting trades, though, that came out of it was in the offseason when they traded for John Collins from the Atlanta Hawks. Now, they did give up Rudy Gay and I believe a second-round draft pick. Now, John Collins did mess up his finger, and ever since then, his shooting splits have been honestly abysmal, specifically from the three-point shooting side, because at one point he did present himself as a promising big in the shooting department. Now, his percentages have dipped significantly, and if he does just end up being a decent defender and a lob threat, similar to the likes of a Clint Capella perhaps, that's still an improvement in my eyes because he's younger than Rudy Gay, and you can keep him on the floor for a more significant amount of time, and he's going to be able to play well in pick and roll situations and whatnot on the defensive side of the ball. And offensively, he's willing to do whatever it takes to get his own shot off. Excluding the draft picks, which obviously continue to turn into more pivotal pieces down the road, it's impressive to think that they really made the fastest rebuild in NBA history, because they went from seeing the ceiling after, I believe it was 5 seasons that they had Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert paired together. I might be slightly off, but they saw the ceiling of those two, which was effectively a Donovan Mitchell run the offense. Either you take the shot or let somebody else take the shot, but you decide who gets the shot. And then on defense, Rudy bail everybody out that gets beat and blown by. Donovan Mitchell was dynamite in a bottle, and Rudy Gobert was a more interesting piece to play on the defense side of the ball. But it was really one handles one side of the ball, one person handles the other side of the ball. And it got them into the playoffs, but it really didn't set the tone for anything beyond maybe a 50-win season. And it was never really going to yield them as being contenders. And understanding this, they decided to blow it up at the right time. They got a good bit of draft capital. They got some consistent players. Lauri Markkanen has really panned out. Like I said, Walker Kessler has also really panned out, and he's going to continue to improve. Again, he's only a sophomore now, obviously being a rookie last year. Colin Sexton looks to come back, hopefully him healthy alongside Jordan Clarkson and the likes of the other guards that they have in that room. They'll be able to get some consistent and strong efforts out of them to relieve some of the offensive burden off of Lauri Markkanen, obviously, in an efficient way and not just in a shot-chucking kind of way. And then we're also looking at the potential for this commodity of players to grow up together and have the floor of the playoffs and eventually have the ceiling of a title contender. Now, they're not quite there yet. I'm not prepared to say that. But I would not be surprised if next season we saw them fighting for the 6th seed, somewhere in the middle of the pack of the playoffs in that Western Conference. With that being said, good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.